how you like it, yeah.
Hello, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and talk about it. Since people are going back to school, at least by the time I'm recording this, it reminded me of this show called Vice Principals, which is what we're talking about today. So the premise for the first episode is when the principal of a high school retires, his two vice principals go to extremes to land the vacant job. Right off the bat, Bill Murray's in this, all right? And if you don't know who Bill Murray is, you're probably young. But I was like, oh, I totally forgot that he is the, inciting incident of this whole thing, that his wife is sick and he is leaving these two in charge, which is Danny McBride and Walter Goggins, who are playing Neil and Lee, but they call him Russell in the show. And they're immediately bickering. They're cussing at each other. I'm like, yo, your boss is right there. And I feel like right off the bat, the show is like, this is going to be the show. Because the rest of the episode, which we'll get into, is them constantly bickering and cussing at each other and just acting like children. And if you don't like that, the show is not for you. But I feel like it was awesome to have the show be like, this is what it is right here from the top, like first couple seconds or minutes, whatever. This is going to be the show. If you like this, enjoy the ride. I liked it already off, just starting. So I enjoyed it, but let's get into, what happens. So I was already like, damn, like you guys are cussing and your boss is right there. So I wonder what kind of school this is, or if they're just setting up like these two characters. And then we jump into a school fight and Neil goes in to stop it. And it's like, okay, he's not, afraid to get in there, mix it up with the kids, break it up, gets punched in the face. Then we go over to, them having their little meeting about what's going on. And you got the kid who's getting bullied in the middle, and you got the other two kids that are bullying him on both his sides. And the other teacher, Miss Snodgrass, is there, and she's like, well, clearly, this kid's getting bullied by these other two kids. And he's like, listen, I want to hear them talk. He's like, Matthew, tell me what's going on. He's like, nothing. We're just messing around. It's like, yo, read the room. He's clearly getting bullied. And even Miss Snodgrass is like, yo, he's clearly getting bullied. Like, can you fix this? And he's like, I need him to say it. Like, you got to say it. Like, Matthew, you got to say it. And he's like, no, we're good. And so he's like, all right, you all get detention. And she's like, what the? And the entire time, he's like talking down to her, which I feel like is like a double-edged sword, because I know this is a show, so this is the character they're trying to set up, so I thought it was funny, in a joking manner, not in general, like talking down to people, but you know what I mean, like he's like talking down with her and like kind of flirting a little bit, but immediately I could feel people being like, well, at least nowadays, being like, oh, this kind of isn't funny because it's more offensive. But for the sake of this conversation, I thought it was funny, so say it's, take a grain of salt with that or whatever. And then, we cut to the cafeteria, and Neil's talking to Deshaun, the lunch man. He's like trying to get the info of like, yo, who do you guys think is going to be the next principal? And I thought it was funny because it felt like people running for politics. Like he's like, all right, what are the poll numbers? What's the school saying about me? And then you see Russell, who's clearly cool with everyone. He's like talking up to the teachers and they're laughing at whatever he's saying. It's like, oh, well, you can tell just based off the vibes of everything that Russell is probably going to be more in line to, be the next principal. But it was kind of cool for him to have, he's like, yeah, I'm like, I'm down to earth. I talk to the people, everyone fears me, which is why I don't really talk to the teachers. He's like, yo, but I'm here for you guys. And Deshaun's like, sweet. So we're going to get like raises if you become principal. And then he just like starts yelling at a kid. He's like, yeah, so we're going to get he just keeps yelling. And it's like, all right, yeah, you're not really for the people. You just want the votes. We then go to that awkward assembly of that girl singing a song. And, if you ever went to school, there's always that assembly or a couple of them where it's like, oh, I don't really want to be here. But it's kind of sad, because his wife is dying and he's leaving, the principal, that is. And then Neil's like, oh, I'll handle this. I'll show everybody what's up. And then gets up, stops the girl from singing, and then is like, oh, are you laughing because she's singing? Are you laughing because the principal's wife is dying right here? And everything. He just makes the everything more awkward. And then he like looks at Bill Murray like, yeah, I got you. And Bill Murray's like, what are you doing, my guy? So yeah, this is already funny off the bat to me. Like, this is working. Granted, I've already seen the series, but I haven't watched it since it came out, and I think this was launched in 2016. So he goes to he goes and sees that little picture of him, and again, this is where we get him confronting Neil and then having more of that banter and that back and forth, and then just them acting like children. Like, he knocks everything off his desk and they're like, I'm gonna be principal, no, I'm gonna be principal. Like, and again, I feel like if you don't like the way that they treat each other, then you're probably not gonna like the rest of the episode, let alone, I assume the show keeps doing it. I don't fully remember, but again, I feel like the show is being like, this is it, like, if you like this, stick around. If you don't, like, this isn't for you, and that's okay. Then we move on to, there's a little small comment about Neil being divorced, but then you see it, and he like immediately goes and he starts, arguing with his wife for no reason as they're watching their daughter ride a horse. And, the new dad, or the stepdad, Ray, is like trying to be nice, and he's like, oh, congratulations on getting that promotion, my guy. And then Neil's like, shut up, Ray, like, I hate you, don't talk to me. And it's like, well, the guy's trying, like, could you give him a little slack? But he doesn't. He is just out to get everyone and just like argue with everyone. And then even then, he sees his daughter and she doesn't have her shirt on, she's only in like a sports bra, and she's like talking to some guys, and he's like, oh, hell no. And he goes over, and this is where I thought it was interesting, where he's like, no, put a shirt on, like, be decent around these kids. And then the mom and the stepdad are in the background, but they don't say anything. And I was like, oh, do they just let her walk around like that? Like, she's like young, like 13 type looking. You know what I mean? I was like, it was in that moment that I was like, oh, I'm on his side a little bit. Like, he's doing this the wrong way, or he's coming a little too aggressive, but I feel more on his side than just having her out and about. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. Let me know. And then we go back to his house. And this was interesting. So he's driving what is that? A Camaro? Oh, not a Camaro. Like a Mustang or something like that. Like some sort of muscle looking car. And he drives it into these. And if you've ever seen, it's just these neighborhood that looks like copy and paste of all the houses. Like these new, kind of like newer aged houses. And honestly, when he goes in there, right, he has a little chair. He has a comfy chair. He has his TV with a TV stand. He has like a side table. And he got a couple chairs on the side. I was like, and decent 1-bedroom looking place. I was like, looked good to me. It's one of those things of like, you see a picture of a guy with like the bare minimum, and other guys are like, yep, looks good to me. And then girls are like, where's all the blah 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 blah. It just reminded me of like that joke online. And I was like, yeah, he looks like he's living just fine. But then you get the phone call, and I'm sure this will go deeper into the season, but, apparently he's a debt collector, so he owes somebody. And then he gets the call, and he's like, yo, they're like, we picked a new principal, so come on down. So the next day he goes, he assumes off the bat that he gets the job as a principal, which is, I don't know why, because clearly no one seems to like him, but this man is living in his own world, which I think is so funny. He parks in the parking spot, he goes inside, he's already sitting at the desk. Russell's like, what are you doing? Get out of my chair. And then the superintendent comes in, he's like, here's the new principal, and it's some new lady, and they're both just like, what the? And Neil has like this crisis, and he like goes outside and he like throws up, and I was like, gross. But also it must, like, to care that much. It's so funny because the whole premise of the show is that both of them want to be principal so bad, but like to care so much about being principal that when you don't get the promotion that you go and throw up is like, oh, this man really like wants the job. Like, that's kind of the point. But like the show being like, this man is throwing up outside because he got to know, is like crazy. But immediately Russell immediately just starts sucking up to the new principal, and it's like, my gosh, she hasn't even been here like a couple of minutes, you're already there. Like, really, I think putting you into the shoes of Neil and being like, even though Russell feels like he's the main character, he's not the main character, So I felt in this moment it was more of showing like Neil's perspective of being like, look at this guy already. It hasn't even been 2 seconds and he's already like massaging her shoulders and stuff. Like, what are we doing here? And then for some reason, again, this man, Neil's living in his own world. He goes to the other teachers and he's like, let's get a petition and let's get her out of here. And everyone's like, no, why would we do that? Like, there's nothing wrong with her. She's qualified. Like, you're going too far. Also, like, we kind of don't like you. No one says that, but you can get the vibe of like, we don't really like you. So like, why would we do that? Also, it's not like he even waited. Like, she hasn't even gone through like a single school day for him to just be like, yeah, let's get her out of here. And then again, this is where we get one of those moments of Neil and Russell doing their thing, arguing with each other, pretending to like punch each other in the face, and they start running around like they're playing tag, and it's like, you guys are full grown adults acting like just grown children. But again, I think this is where the humor and the kind of the whole crux of the show is like, these two can't stand each other and they're constantly bickering. So it's like, how will anything get done here? Oh yeah, so he goes home. He gets surprised by his daughter and Ray, and they're like, congratulations on the promotion. And this is where the show took a little bit of a turn that I didn't expect, because any other show would be like, have him lie, say he got the promotion, and then the rest of the show would be him trying to get that promotion, right? But right off the bat, he's like, listen, I didn't get it, okay? I suck. Everyone leaves me. Like, I'm not good at this. No one likes me. Like, you don't need to throw a party. This, like, nothing good is happening right now. And his daughter's like, Daddy, you can do this. And even Ray's like, listen, man, the kids like you. So even if everyone else doesn't like you, like, I'm sure you can figure something out. And then when he says that, even though he doesn't like Ray, and he's like, Ray, stop talking, you can see he has an idea. So the next day, right, he goes and picks up Matthew, the nice kid, and he's like, I'll let you out of in-school suspension if you organize a walkout because of the new principal. And then Matthew's like, okay, I'll do it. And then there's some point in that conversation where he's like, if you stay in ISS too long, your bad things are gonna happen to you. Like, you're gonna, like, jail type things are gonna happen to you. And I'm like, yo, this kid is like 13. Also, you like picked him up out of nowhere, which he shouldn't have gotten in the car, but he did anyways. And it's like, if that kid really wanted to, he could tell his parents, and the police could be called, and you could lose your job and maybe go to jail. So I was like, I don't know, Neil, what you thought this was gonna do. Like, this is a terrible idea. So he goes to talk to Snodgrass, and he's like, listen, I'll let Matthew out of ISS. I'm a good person, but don't you worry, like, things are gonna turn around. And she's just kind of like, cool. Also, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes and tells Deshaun, the lunch guy, he's like, yeah, like, things are about to turn around here in like a big way. And Deshaun's like, are you gonna shoot up the school? And he's like, no, why did you think that? He's like, I'm just saying, like, things are gonna go, in a different direction, and if violence gotta happen, it's gonna happen. He's like, so you're gonna shoot up the school? And he's like, no, stop saying that. And he's like, all right. But the lunch guys are looking at each other like, I don't know, this guy seems a little sus. So they're having the principal and the vice principals are having a meeting, and then he's constantly looking at the clock, right, at this point. And I don't know why, again, that this man thought that this was going to work, because one, clearly clearly Matthew isn't popular. So I was like, how would he organize a walkout? And again, I don't think the principal has been there for even like a day. So there's no hate for all the kids to be like, yeah, we're gonna walk out on this terrible principal because she hasn't been terrible yet. So again, I'm like, what world is this man living in? Also, nobody likes him. So he goes and finds Matthew, and he's like, why didn't you do it? And he's like, I try, but no one wants to do it. Like, this is a new principal. Like, no one wants to walk out yet. And he's like, yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to put you back in ISS. And then he threatens to have a kid go and grape him without the G. And I'm like, my guy, this is, again, this is how you get fired and put in jail. Like, what are you talking about? And then, he goes back. Neil goes back to talk to Belinda, the new principal. And she's like, yo, I heard you put a little complaint about me to the superintendent. And he's like, listen, I'm not going to play games. It was me. Okay? I did it. And she was like, listen, motherfucker, this is my house now. Okay? So you keep trying shit like that and it's just going to get real fast. Okay? So you're going to sit in your place and you're going to listen to my, my rules. And it's like immediately like she uses her power, and Neil, who was trying to be this big guy this whole time, immediately like tail between his legs. And it's like, oh, like she's running stuff now. And she's like, you know what? Why don't you work like the early morning shifts? And he's like, I have to come in like at 5 a.m. She's like, good, we'll see you there. And he's like, okay. And then that part where he's like, he goes to close the door, and she's like, leave it open. He's like, what? She's like, leave it open. And he's like, okay. And he like leaves it open. He like completely turns into a bitch. So I think it was great to have her, show that she not only has power, but like the fact that like when she says something, like the tough guy Neil immediately starts jumping. It's like, oh, okay, so yeah, she is a threat. Well, to them, she is a threat. And then it ends on this funny moment of him, directing the buses, and then Russell's across the street, like strutting towards him, talking to him on a walkie-talkie, being like, listen, you played your game, you tried to go in strong, I'm playing the long game. Either way, I don't like her. You, me, enemy of my enemy, let's do this. And they're like, all right. And they shake hands, and then the fight is on. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty funny, it is one of those like not dark humor, but you know what I mean, like crass humor. Like it's humor is so hard to get because it's like either you like it or you don't. This show is clearly meant for me, and again, this show is one of the older HBO shows, so there is a certain maturity to it. So I liked it, but it'd be interesting to see if people who watch it now would have the same feeling about it, with just some ways that people view society and the way that like jokes don't age as well, and everything that we've been through just in the country of America. But I liked it. That was a little bit of a ramble, but I liked it. So going to my rating, right? So I have 3 ratings. It's 1 and done. Give it a chance. I'm in. Off this first episode, I would immediately say I'm in. I thought it was funny. Again, the banter between them and the way that they immediately turn into children anytime Neil and Russell interact with each other is really funny. Because it's like, it's not even like they're in their 20s. They're like in their 40s or, like 30s or 40s. It's like you guys are acting like actual children. I think that's hilarious. I think having the new principal come in and be a force already is like, oh, okay, how are they going to take this? Oh, not take this out, but like how are they going to handle this? And the fact that like Neil is the brute force guy and Russell's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna pretend to be your friend and then stab you in the back. It's like, okay, well, how are these two styles gonna mix? And like clearly some shit's gonna come to a head. And what does that look like? Not to mention that Neil has his own problems. So yeah, I think there's a lot in this episode, and again, it's only 30 minutes, so it's not like this hour long. It's like you're in, you're out. So yeah, I'd give it I'm in. I remember that this show, I don't remember enough to spoil it, but I do remember that this show is only 2 seasons. I should have looked up, but it's really not that many episodes. Again, each one is like 30 minutes, so in and out. And I remember them being like, we had a specific story that they wanted to tell in 2 seasons, and that's why it's 2 seasons long, which I always love. It's like, why run a show into the ground if like this is a story you want to tell, like tell that story and then move on. Unfortunately, I don't think this hit in a major way. Like I don't remember people talking about it, but I always thought it was funny, and the fact that it was in and out always felt like I wish it kind of was a little bit bigger, of being like, hey, watch this, it's short, you don't have to commit too much time to it. But I mean, I don't have the numbers, so who's to say how well it actually performed? Alright, well, that's where I'm going to leave this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to give this episode a rating or a comment wherever you hear it, and I appreciate your time. Alright, peace.